everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Dana Trupiana, and I cover infamous gangsters every week in a true crime-like format. My show, Mob Times, comes out every Tuesday morning. I don't really know what time, but it's sometime on Tuesday morning. Well, it is Tuesday morning, so here I am. So it's been a while since I've actually talked to you guys. I just got done with a 5-part episode on Angelo Leonardo, and I was kind of trying to just power through those. Honestly, the family from Cleveland and a lot of people that know the family in Cleveland have been trying to get an actual documentary made about that one. So I wanted to get that episode out, and I kind of knew it wasn't going to get a whole lot of likes or views or followers, but I had gone to Cleveland and I did these interviews and I just wanted to get that all put together. So now we're finally on to another gangster, and I'm so excited about this one today because for the first time in forever, we're going to do one gangster, one episode, one and done. Yay for us. Today we're going to dive into the story of Omar Portee, better known as OG Mac or Godfather Mac, a major player in the world of the American gang culture, especially on the streets of New York City. Other names that Portee went by were the Godfather of the Bloods, the Almighty, the Big Homie, Omar Porter, Pierre Johnson, Ron Johnson, the Panther, the Unknown, John Varfley, the Big Lion, OG Mac, John Johnson, and the Anybody Killer. Omar Portee was born in October of 1969, putting him at 54 years old as of right now. Portee was not just another gang member, he was a leader, calling the shots and running the show and creating the gang altogether. He had street smarts, charisma, and a knack for keeping his crew in line. And Portee's influence went far beyond just his crew. He helped shape the gang culture of all of New York City and beyond, creating the UBN, which would become a force to be reckoned with. This was no joke. But his criminal activities also brought a lot of heat from the cops, eventually leading to his arrest and forever behind bars. This is one of those episodes that I'm gonna do, and I don't really have a lot of source material. So if you've ever watched my channel before, you know that I do a lot of old school mafia gangsters. And there is endless literature on a lot of those guys. It's very rare that I cover somebody that hasn't been covered by every YouTuber, and there's just so much out there. Not a lot of stuff is out there on Portee. Because of that, I don't really have too much information about his life as a kid. All I really know is that his journey in the criminal world began when he was only 17 years old, pulling off his first robbery. Now, personally, I can't find anything about the arrest when he was 17 years old, because that would have been in 1986, but the first crime that I'm able to actually confirm myself is in 1989, and in 1989, he would have been 19 years old. I do see it reported that his first arrest for robbery was when he was 17 years old. So I do want to bring it up and let you guys know about that. But the arrest that I can physically see in his background is the one in 1989. So that's the one I'm going to actually go through, because the only mention I can find of the 17-year-old one is in a news article. The 19-year-old one is the one I physically see. So we'll go through that one, and you guys just know he was arrested when he was 17. I probably don't see it because it's more than likely expunged from his record. A lot of the time, things that you do when you're a kid before you turn 18 years old, as long as it's nothing serious like murder, anybody that catches charges before they hit 18 years old, a lot of times it'll be expunged from the record, and it looks like that's what happened here with Portee. So it doesn't really matter whether he was 17 or 19 for his first arrest. It's moving forward that seems to be the trouble. And trouble is something that seemed to follow him along wherever he went, and he was not one to shy away from it. Of course, prison didn't really slow him down. If anything, it fueled his ambitions. So before we start going through all the crimes that Portee committed, I do want to go through a significant event that went down in Omar Portee's life in the streets of the Bronx in 1987. In the early hours of August 16th, 1987, an argument about a crack deal gone wrong spirals out of control on the streets of the Bronx, leading to a tragic shooting that would claim the life of Terrance Joyner. Now, according to Portee, he was right there, and he allegedly witnessed Don Taylor pull the trigger and kill Joyner. Now, Portee is a key witness to this shooting. Portee's testimony became a game changer in the legal proceedings that followed that were attempting to get Don Taylor put behind bars for this crime. Portee's account of what went down that night held serious weight and could make or break the case against Don Taylor. And this wasn't just another trial. Don Taylor is staring down the barrel of some serious time, and Portee's testimony could seal his fate. Now, I just want to stop here real quick, and I do want to mention that it's wild as hell that this boy would form an entire network of gangs after becoming a rat, because this is 1987. This is way before the UBN even is a thought in his mind. And this boy is a rat. Like, he's on the stand testifying against somebody. The mafia would never. But that is what's about to happen here. Portee's testimony kicked off a legal showdown against Don Taylor, who was looking at homicide or manslaughter charges. The prosecution leaned hard on Portee's eyewitness testimony to make their case stick against Taylor. Now, fast forward to April 25th, 1989, my birthday, by the way. Not the year, that's a little before my time, but that is my birthday. So anyway, on April 25th, 1989, the jury drops the hammer. Don Taylor is guilty, thanks in most part to Portee's testimony. Taylor was slapped with a sentence of 22 and a half years to life in jail. And I am screaming right now. This man was a rat. He sat on the witness stand and told on somebody. And then people followed him and created a gang and killed people in his name. And now when you look him up, it's oh, I heard that no, he ratted. Period. How embarrassing. Portee's account, it wasn't just one piece of evidence in this big trial. It was the difference between Taylor walking free and going to jail for the rest of his life. Prosecution never would have been able to get a guilty verdict had it not been for Portee sitting on the witness stand and confirming, yes, I watched Don Taylor kill Terrance Joyner. And the way that most other people would look at this, if they weren't interested in organized crime and see the way that it usually works, other normal people, so I recognize I'm not normal, but other normal people will look at this and they'll be happy that Portee helped to put a murderer behind bars. Personally, I see this and I laugh, because after this upstanding citizen did the right thing and testified and had a violent criminal put in jail, he went on to create one of the most deadly gangs there ever was. And this entire thing is built on the back of an informant's shoulders. Jesus Christ. Okay, so let's take a look at 1993, when Portee is hit with a 2.5 to 5 year sentence for weapons possession. The charges were filed on November 17th, 1993, and he was charged with criminal possession of a weapon in the Bronx, or at least that's where he went to court for the charges. I'm not really sure exactly where the crime happened. He was given 2 to 5 years. He became eligible for parole on August 20th, 1995. He was denied parole, and they threw the whole damn book at him. They said, oh, you want to play games? Here's the find out part of FAFO. You got 2 to 5, you're doing 5. He did his entire sentence, being released on June 22nd, 1999. Now, instead of just doing his time and having his time wasted for the entire 5 years that they made him serve, he sees an opportunity. In prison, he crosses paths with Leonard OG Deadeye McKenzie and a whole bunch of other gang-connected people, and he starts cooking up some big plans. Within a year of Portee starting his sentence, the UBN is born right there on Rikers Island. Portee and McKenzie decide that it's time to unite the inmates under one powerful banner. Now, I am no criminal lawyer or expert or anything like that, but I'm willing to bet that Portee forming a whole-ass gang while he's in prison had something to do with the fact that he was denied parole. Usually, if you get 2 to 5, you're going to end up on the lower end of that sentence. You're going to do 2 years, 3 years. A lot of people will even do less than that. They'll do 13 months. Having to serve the maximum of his 2 to 5 year sentence means that he went before the parole board, and the parole board saw what he was doing in jail, and they were absolutely not putting that man back on the streets before they absolutely had to. The gang that these guys formed together, the UBN or the United Blood Nation, they're not just looking out for themselves. They're building a brotherhood to protect each other in this rough prison environment that they're forced into. But they didn't stop there. The UBN was not content with just ruling the prison yard. Portee and McKenzie had a lot bigger dreams. They wanted the UBN to be a force to be reckoned with both inside and outside of prison walls. So they laid the groundwork for expansion, spreading their influence from coast to coast. And with that, the UBN was on the rise, and gang culture in the United States would never be the same. Their reach extended far beyond the prison gates, and their fingers ended up in all kinds of pies. Drug trafficking, extortion, you name it. If it was a RICO predicate, they were doing it. During the late 1990s, New York City's gang scene was rapidly changing with this new and super violent crew called the United Blood Nation, or UBN as I'll be referring to them, with them causing chaos on the streets. Unlike other gangs, the UBN took things to a whole nother level of brutality. They also had similar outlooks as the Black Panthers. And that makes a lot of sense, because this whole gang was born because they were being targeted by Hispanic gangs while they were in jail. So the infusion of the Black Panther ideology, it fits. As the mastermind behind the UBN, Portee called the shots with an iron fist. He built the gang from the ground up, recruiting members from all walks of life, and instilling a sense of loyalty that bordered on fascism. Under his leadership, the UBN became synonymous with fear and violence, and left a trail of destruction in its wake. What set the UBN apart was its love for chaos. They did not discriminate. Innocent bystanders, rival gang members, it did not matter. Shootings, stabbings, you named it. If it caused chaos, they were all in. There was nobody that was exiled or protected from their wrath. Taking inspiration from the California-based blood gangs, Portee, he kind of put his own spin on things, creating a whole new beast on the East Coast. While it's said that the actual original gang, the actual Bloods, were not exactly thrilled that the UBN had formed on the East Coast, it's funny because it's really reminiscent of how the actual Bloods were formed. Now, keep in mind, what I say here, it's all just based on literature online. I don't have any insider knowledge, and if what's available online is incorrect, then I'm going to be incorrect here. I have a lot of people tell me, you don't know the background or the legacy of these gangs, and you're right, I don't. I'm telling you what these news sources and FBI documents tell me. If there's an alternate history that people within the gang are aware of, it's just not something that I'm aware of. So what FBI documents and news sources and all of the literature available tells me is that the Bloods were formed in the 1970s in Los Angeles, California in a very similar way to the United Blood Nation. 7 individual street gangs were taken, combined, and formed into one gang that would now be known as the Bloods. The East Coast UBN quickly surpassed their original gang, with numbers climbing into the thousands. But even with that, the East Coast gang is not officially recognized as real Bloods by the LA Bloods. The UBN operates pretty similarly to the original Bloods, with all gangs being under one umbrella gang On the West Coast, that's the Bloods. On the East Coast, that's the United Blood Nation. Now, just because you became a member of the UBN does not mean that you lost your original roots. Gangs came together to form the UBN, but those gangs still maintain their own names. The Nine Trey Gangsters were still the Nine Trey Gangsters. They operated under the larger umbrella that is the United Blood Nation, but they're still the Nine Trey Gangsters. Since I know that most of my viewers are mafia aficionados, think of it in the way that the commission came together, and New York's 5 families still exist. The Gambino family was still the Gambino family. The Bonanno family was still the Bonanno family. And yes, I'm fully aware that that's not what they were called when they were formed. Those guys weren't the leaders. They weren't even thought of at the time. But let's just use those names because they're the ones that everybody's familiar with. So they still existed as their own individual families, but they just existed under one umbrella, which in the mafia was the commission. Same thing here. The Nine Trey Gangsters were still their own entity. They just existed under the UBN umbrella, and all high-level decisions were made by New York, the way that all high-level mafia decisions are made by New York by the commission. The same way that the commission is known as the commission, the group in New York that makes the high-level decisions for the UBN had a name that they went by as well. They were known as the Rims, the Strange Structure, or the Empire Structure. Also, much like the mafia, each member of the UBN had its own rank. The only thing that's a little different than the mafia is that rank is different per crew. In the mafia, you are a boss, an underboss, consigliere, a capo, or a soldier. In the UBN, you have structural names as well. But in the UBN, each set has their own names for those ranks. And each of those sets had their own individual job in the UBN, I guess you could call it. The Nine Trey Gangsters were enforcers. 183 were teachers and breeders. And Sex, Money, Murder were the money handlers. Now, these distinctions, they kind of still linger to this day, but I think a lot of it has been thrown to the wayside and everybody kind of does their own thing, much different than what it was back then when it was first formed, and this is the way it went. And again, I go by FBI documents and news documents, and I have no way of knowing for sure if any of this is the way that it actually is. This is just what's written down, so it's what I'm reiterating. Now, within each of those sets, they also have things that set them apart. Some of these guys even have their own alphabet. They have hand signs that go as far as being able to consider it a different language, like a gang American Sign Language. It's wild to look up and see how much language is available through hand signs. And these hand signs can be used to communicate the set that they belong to, the acts that they did or plan to do, really anything. They have their own alphabet, they have their own number codes, so that they can write in communication that can't be deciphered. Like, the gang culture is literally like its own society with its own languages and mannerisms and a whole society. I don't even... There's a word I'm searching for. I can't think of it, but there is a word. And it fits perfectly for this. So individual sets had their own individual rank names. The Nine Trey Gangsters have ranks like Godfather, Big O2O, Low O2O, 5-star General, 4-star General, and so on and so forth, all the way down to 1-star General. And below that is a Scrap. Another set, the Southside Brim, have Triple OG, OG, Baby OG, OYG, Young Gangster, OBG, and Baby Gangster. The O in those names means original, and the rest you can guess, like BG is Baby Gangster, YG, Young Gangster, and so on and so forth. And not all sets have those names. Other sets have ministers, captains, lieutenants. Each set had its own hierarchy with its own name. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still the same thing. It's just different names. Now, interestingly enough, if you are into the mafia, you know that there's 2 different organizations. There's the Commission, which rules over the Italian mafia, and there's the National Crime Syndicate, which has the leaders of multiple mafia groups all over the country. Think like the Irish Mafia, the Jewish Mafia, a whole lot of different criminal organizations are in the National Crime Syndicate. Well, the same kind of thing exists in the Bloods' neck of the woods as well. The Bloods are a part of People Nation, which is the same kind of idea as the National Crime Syndicate. Leaders from all of the really important and powerful street gangs belong to the People Nation. The Bloods, Latin Kings, Vice Lord Nation, and the Black Pea Stone Nation are all a part of the People's Nation. There's another sect, the Folk Nation, that has a whole other set of gangs. And most street gangs fall under one of those two groups, the People's Nation or the Folk Nation. Now, I say that the UBN has similarities to the Mafia and not the other way around where the Mafia has similarities to them because even the UBN's big brother, the original Bloods, were formed in the 1970s. The Mafia dates back to before the 20s, but if we're looking at when they were officially put together and given the commission and yada yada, that all happened in the 30s. So well before any of these guys got together. So they get the original distinction and the UBN is like the Mafia. Now, let's go through some distinctions of the UBN and what it means and how you can tell if somebody's in the UBN. While body art and art that's put up on walls is a clear physical feature to show their affiliation with this gang, there's also gestures that they do to communicate with other members or even people that aren't affiliated without verbalizing and risking being seen, heard, or interrupted. One of those gestures is a hand sign. The UBN gangsters use hand gestures to greet each other, give each other warnings, and they also use it to scare the crap out of anybody who knows what it means but isn't affiliated. Everything they do, even down to the way that they walk, stand, lean, everything they do is meant as a communication tactic, whether they be communicating with friend or foe. Police were able to get their hands on pages and pages of rules and regulations that laid out everything for this gang. This particular set of pages was from the Southside Brim, and it explained everything from hand gestures to body gestures, words they used, things they hated, everything. Now, again, very, very outdated information. But let's go through a few of these gestures. Now, if you're around somebody that's in one of these gangs and they were to say, rub their nose in front of you, do you know what that means? Now you will. Here's a few of the common gestures that are laid out. Now, before I go through these things, I do have to specify that I have the same rules for this video as I do for any Mafia video I've ever recorded. I have absolutely no insider knowledge on any of this. I do not know one blood. There's nobody giving me tips. This is all public domain. The same way that I gather information on any of the Mafia gangsters that I've covered before is the same way that I got information here. Google. Please don't hate me for putting this information in a video. It's already out there on Google. I'm just reiterating, okay? I have no insider knowledge. Nobody's feeding me anything. This is all just stuff you can find on Google. If a gangster were to wipe their face, it's a gesture that they're warning those nearby that police are present. If they were to rub their head, they're signaling to hit the target right there. Say they were to scratch their forehead. Run, because they're signaling that a fight is about to take place. I don't know how this one works, but if they blink at each other, they're asking if they have a weapon. In response to this, the other person will either rub their nose to say, no, I don't have a weapon, or they'll lean on a wall or other object with one leg perched up to signify that yes, they do in fact have a weapon on them. If they rub their nose indicating that they don't have a weapon, the first party that blinked may rub their ear. This would tell the second person to go get your guns and come back. Now, getting into the more violent gestures, if a UBN gangster were to use their right hand to massage their left shoulder, they're indicating that they're about to rob somebody or something. If they were to take their left finger and put it on the inside of their right fist, twist, and then take it out, they're letting other people know around them that they're about to fight or attack their enemies. Rubbing their stomach gives the signal to nearby brothers to surround the enemy and get ready to attack. Now moving on to more subtle gestures. Looking at your fist would indicate to nearby people to be careful. I'm guessing that's more of a, like, I'm looking at my fist, and if you don't chill, it's gonna be in your mouth soon kind of thing. I don't really know, but that's what it seems like to me. And last but not least, wiping the bottom of your shoe is an indication that there's a nearby enemy. Now, again, this shit is all literally pulled right off of Google, and it was way back in 2008. So I'm willing to bet that they know that these gestures have been spotted, and they're completely different now. This is just what it was in 2008 when the police were able to seize all this paperwork that laid this all out. I have no idea if some, all, or any of these gestures are still in use. But this is what Southside Brim was using to communicate with each other back in April of 2008. A long time ago, when I first started doing these videos, I made a list of common mafia terms and what they meant. Along with that, I made a timetable that goes through the bosses of each of the 5 families and who the bosses were since the original 5 families were created. Actually, most of the families I have further back than the creation of the commission and the 5 families. Now, as time has gone by, I've done a lot of research on the subject, and I don't really rely on that list anymore. But in the beginning, I really needed it because there's so much terminology and specifics that I just could not remember. The UBN, they have this as well. Let's go through some of the specific words within the gang that are known to be used to communicate with each other undetected. Although police and authorities are obviously very aware of it because I got this information on Google, so I'm sure it's way outdated and they've come up with a whole new set of words and terms, but let's go over the ones that are reported in the articles that I'm looking at right now. Damu means blood in Swahili. Wood or Inglewood is used to describe gang knowledge, which is like, the rules, the codes, the structure, the terminology, the gestures, all of that. East Side is used to connotate loyalty and affiliation to the UBN. Now, the article that I saw said that this was because the UBN was formed on the east side of Rikers Island, but I don't think that's what it means. Personally, I think that they're referring to the gang existing on the east side of the United States as opposed to the west side, which is just the original Bloods. I mean, if you look at Tupac versus Biggie, like the west side and the east side, it's a big thing. So I don't think it's because it was created on the east side of Rikers. Just saying. The word suwu or suwoop means Blood's rule. A greeting of suwu is returned by the greeting of woo. These words are kind of meant to sound like a police siren. Or they'll say this word. I'm not even going to say it because I'll sound like an idiot saying it. So we're going to read this word, which represents the sound of automatic gunfire. And these words are just used to announce to those nearby that they too are present and belonging to their set. 5 is a reference to a fellow UBN member. And I do know that the original Bloods have the whole 5 thing as well. Big homie refers to a higher ranking member, while big fool generally refers to a senior ranking member that's present. When you hear them talk about tuition or donation, that's referring to the gang dues that are due every month. Typically, gang dues are $31 or $93 a month, I believe. I don't know. It's probably not the same anymore. It has to be more than that. That's not enough money. Lick, rip, sunstroke, jug, or grinding refer to a robbery. On the wall is a suspension of gang membership. DNA refers to an internal gang investigation. Green light means that permission has been granted by a higher ranking UBN member to a lower ranking member to do an act. So like you get the green light to do this. Food and on the plate are gang terms, which mean that the individual gang member or a non-gang member is targeted for some kind of physical attack. So like, oh, that person's food. Like, they're chum. Like, they're about to be a victim. Now, when it comes to graffiti, this is their way of leaving a mark and sending a message to rival gangs. At the time of these articles, it was the Crips, because they were kind of the main enemy of the Bloods. I don't think that that's the case anymore, but that was the case back then. in this graffiti, you would typically see a lowercase c with an uppercase K. And that just kind of showed that there was beef with the Crips, and CK stands for Crip Killer, which makes it clear where they stand. They're a blood, they're a Crip Killer. That's what that means. Honestly, guys, I'm gonna let you know, I was a little worried about this because I didn't want to offend anybody by saying this kind of stuff. Like, it's pretty brutal to say. But then I was like, okay, so what's the alternative? Write it on the screen? Like, that's kind of worse because that's how you see it written. So I'm saying it out loud just because I feel like it would be worse if I wrote it on the screen, and I can't just leave it out altogether. Like, it's information that goes into this episode. So I'm very sorry if there's anybody out there that's affiliated that's kind of offended that I'm saying these words, but I don't know about you, but like, I think it would be more offensive to see it on the screen. So we're going with speaking them. So if you see a lowercase c and an uppercase K, it means Crip Killer. They belong to the Bloods. That's where they stand. It's very old school and you don't really see it anymore, but it does still happen where you'll see somebody online talking and you'll see the lowercase c and the uppercase K added onto it. And they do it every time they type the letter C. So, for example, they'll write cat, but instead of writing cat, C-A-T, they'll write C uppercase K-A-T. Or chant will be C uppercase K-H-A-N-T. And it also goes the opposite way too, where someone from the Crips would write on paper or type or put on graffiti. They'll do the same thing with a lowercase b and uppercase K, where like they'll write big as lowercase b, uppercase K, lowercase I-G. And bone will be written as B capital K-O-N-E. It doesn't matter if it works in the word, it's just they don't write that letter without the K after it. Now, once again, I have no affiliation with any gang, anyone, no one. These words that I'm speaking or being written on the screen, they do not indicate my feelings whatsoever towards either group, towards any group. I am uninvolved, okay? This is purely informative. Some of my favorite people in history are mafia members, so I got no ill will towards anybody, so no hate. Anyway, it's a little hard to read this stuff sometimes, especially if you're looking at somebody that writes like that, and they're writing in sentences, and you gotta kind of decipher where to take the K out because it doesn't fit. It's a little weird. I honestly don't know if that's a thing still. Like, I've seen it maybe once or twice in the last 10 years. I do see it from time to time. It does still exist, but it's very rare. Once in a blue moon, I'll see somebody commenting in like the comment section or something, and they're typing this way, and like, I know that that's what that means, but most other people really don't know what that means, so like, I've never seen it like commented on. If somebody's writing like that, I've never seen it where somebody comments back and they start like talking shit about sets or anything like that. So very rare and outdated, but again, this is what was going on at the time that we were able to get these papers. Now, while stances and gestures and specific words can kind of identify that they belong to a certain set, another thing that you'll see a lot is UBN tattoos. Some common UBN tattoos include the letters MOB, which stands for Members of Bloods, or let's be real, we all know what MOB, money over, stands for, so whatever. A 5-pointed star is another common tattoo that you're going to see in the UBN. The points of the star each represent the 5 points of knowledge within UBN: life, love, loyalty, obedience, and respect. Another common tattoo that you'll see is 3 circular brands or burn marks or circles that are on the skin in the form of a triangle, which is commonly known in the organization as dog paws, and it just represents the UBN as a whole. You'll also see a lot of tattoos that symbolize a particular set that the member belongs to. So now let's take a look at the villain origin story of this group. We've gone through everything that these gangsters do to communicate that they belong to the UBN and ways that they communicate other kinds of things within the group, but we haven't really gone over how the UBN actually was created or why. Now, I'm going to be honest here, I don't know where this date comes from, and I don't think it's correct. But in the article I was looking at, it was reported that the United Blood Nation was reportedly started on July 16, 1993. Now, the reason that I know that this is wrong is that, so charges were filed on this charge on November 17, 1993. I've seen that he was arrested in August of 93 and was just held until November 17th when charges were officially filed, which just means that he has a really shitty lawyer. If he was in jail from August to November without official charges being placed. But even if that's the case, how did he create a gang on July 16, 1993 if he wasn't locked up until August and charges weren't filed until November of 93? So I don't think that this date, and that's something you'll see in Wikipedia. So it's not some obscure piece of news media, it's Wikipedia. And it's wrong. There's no way it could have been then. I think that Wikipedia may have gotten this because I do see sources that say that he was locked up in 1992. That is not the case. He was not locked up in 1992. The only way he possibly could have been in jail in 1992 is if they arrested him in 92 and then he had to wait all the way until November of 1993 to have charges actually be placed. And I believe that zero. I don't believe it. It's not true. Even the idea that he was in jail from August to November without charges being placed is kind of bonkers to me. I know for a fact that charges were placed on November 17, 1993. I don't know exactly what his arrest date was, but November 17, 1993, that's the date that he was charged with these crimes. But at the end of the day, if he was arrested and he was sitting in jail in July of 1993 and didn't have charges pressed, I'm not talking go to trial, get found guilty, I'm talking charges were not pressed. There was no charges holding him in jail until all the way in November of 93. He had probably the worst lawyer that has ever existed ever. So make of that what you will. But anyway, so it's not like he could have been in jail on priors. The only prior time that he had ever gotten a charge, or up until he was 18, I mean, I know that I said that he had charges back when he was 17 years old, but after the age of 18, the only other priors that he has was a charge on June 9th, 1989 for a robbery in the first degree. He was charged on June 9th, 1989, and he was released on June 20th, 1990, serving only days over 1 full year. He was given a charge of 2 to 6 years, but he was paroled after only 6 months. So that means that he was arrested June 9th, 1989. He was held in jail until 6 months later when he was sentenced to 2 to 6 years, and then 6 months from that date, on June 20th, 1990, he was paroled. And when he was paroled, he was put back out on the streets until this next charge. So there is no way this man was in jail in 1992, which is what a lot of reports say. That's just not the case. And I don't think it's possible that the UBM was created July 16th, 1993. So I know you'll see that date in Wikipedia, but I'm fairly certain that's wrong. I don't know, man. I don't know where people get the shit that they talk about or where they got the information that they wrote up on this case. It's very weird. I don't know. Now, regardless of whatever date it all started sometime in either late 1993 or early 1994 when two big players in the gang world, Omar OG Mac Portee and Leonard OG Deadeye McKenzie, they joined forces. They want to bring together all of these different street gangs under one roof to stand up against their rivals like the Nietas and the Latin Kings. They work together with gangsters like Killer Kev, Corey C.K. King, Mel Cross, Wildcat, Magoo, and Soul B to get all of the separate factions united under one proverbial roof. They rallied up a bunch of other gangs to join forces. You have the Nine Trey Gangsters, who referred to themselves as Billies, the Gangster Killer Bloods, or G-Shine, and they also went by Julius B. Sonny. You got Sex Money Murder, 183 Gangster Bloods, and the Valentine Gangster Bloods, or just the Valentine Bloods, who would also go by Tony Starks. And then last but not least, you got the Bloodstone Villains. And now all of these gangs are going to unite under one roof, one umbrella gang, and hence the name United Blood Nation, uniting the blood gangs together. So now, why did they create this umbrella gang to preside over all of these smaller factions that already exist? Well, these gangs were facing some serious threats from other crews that are in the prison system. At the time, the LKs were the largest gang in the New York prison system, and individual blood members or individual blood factions, they're a lot more vulnerable than they would be if they all teamed up. If they had higher numbers, people would think think twice about attacking them. But when they're out there on their own, nobody really thinks twice. By teaming up, they were able to protect their turf, they were able to boost their street cred, and they were able to expand criminal operations without anybody getting in their way. And once the UBN was formed, they did not waste any time making a name for themselves. They quickly became major players in the world of organized crime, controlling huge chunks of territory and getting involved in pretty much everything. Drugs, extortion, anything that you can name that's criminal, these guys are involved. Now again, the UBN, they draw inspiration from the original Bloods in California, but they're their own separate entity. They share some symbols and colors, but the UBN operates independently from the California Bloods. And they have their own set of rules and customs and completely different things than the California Bloods do. Think of it more as like a nod of respect, because these individual gangs, they considered themselves to belong to the California Bloods. And then they decided to all team up on the East Coast because there's not that many over on the East Coast. So they all get together and go under one roof. But they still have the name in their name. So it's the United Blood Nation instead of just some other random name. Not long after being created, the UBN became the big dogs on the block, overshadowing rivals like the Crips with their aggressive moves and their growing numbers. Throughout the 90s, UBN spreaded like wildfire, recruiting left and right and setting up shop in all major cities across the East Coast. They offered protection, camaraderie, and, let's be real, plenty of opportunities for criminal enterprises. With their ever-expanding crew and resources, they were able to push out rival gangs and take the top spot in the underworld. Now, they're quickly starting to outnumber the Crips. They're even outnumbering the Latin Kings, who, remember, they were created because the Latin Kings were so far outnumbering all other gangs. So the fact that they were able to start to outnumber the Latin Kings means this is spreading exponentially. But every empire has its downfall, and for the UBN, it came in 2001 when their founder, Omar "OG Mac" Portee, got nabbed on federal charges. His arrest shook the gang to its core, throwing their leadership into chaos and putting a huge dent in their power. The feds hit Portee with a laundry list of charges, including racketeering and conspiracy, which would ultimately deal a huge blow to the UBN's operations. Portee's arrest sent shockwaves through the UBN, sparking infighting and making them a bigger target to law enforcement. Without their leader to call the shots and hold them together, the gang struggled to keep fighting together. So now that Portee is back behind bars, let's go ahead and rewind back to the beginning. Back to the conviction of Don Taylor, which would turn out to be a wrongful conviction. And that's all thanks to the false testimony provided by a big-time blood gang leader, Omar Portee. Let's unpack what went down. Back in 1987, there's a murder in the Bronx, and Don Taylor gets pinned for it because Omar Portee took the stand and said, hey, I watched Don Taylor kill Terrance Joyner. I watched him pull the trigger. Based on Omar Portee's testimony, Taylor gets slammed with a sentence of 22 years to life for a crime that he has sworn since the day it happened he did not commit. Now, fast forward a long time, Portee suddenly does a 180, admitting that he straight up lied about seeing Taylor do the deed. So, if it isn't bad enough that this man is a rat, his ratting was based on false testimony, and he put an innocent man in prison and just went on to build an entire criminal empire, while this man rotted in jail for a crime that Portee put him in jail for, but that he didn't commit. Now, Portee coming out and saying, hey, I lied, that bombshell puts a huge wrench in the case against Taylor, and it raises some serious doubts about his conviction. With Portee's bombshell confession, the Bronx DA's office steps up to right the wrong that was done to Don Taylor. They push to have Taylor's conviction tossed, and Judge Stephen Barrett does just that, acknowledging that Taylor got a raw deal and set him free immediately. But Taylor's story doesn't end there. He is not letting that slide, and nor should he. He slaps the city of New York with a $22 million lawsuit, claiming that he was framed by crooked cops and prosecutors who knew that he was innocent from the day he was arrested, but went after him anyway, pretty much just so that they had somebody to pin this on. This is a battle for justice and compensation for 17 years of this man's life being spent behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. Before Omar Portee testified against Taylor, he was already in hot water with the law. He was facing his robbery charges at the same time. Looking back on it now, Portee may have had motive to lie and say that Don Taylor committed this crime and that he watched him do it in order to score some brownie points and wiggle his way out of his own legal mess. Taylor's lawsuit did not hold back, pointing fingers at Bronx law enforcement officials for some seriously shady shit. This lawsuit claims that officials strong-armed Portee into lying about Taylor's involvement in the murder. They allegedly dangled promises of leniency in Portee's face if he would just pin the crime on Taylor. And okay, that's all fine, well and good, because if I was Taylor, I would do the same thing. You're not going to go after Portee. You can't get shit from him. You can't get blood from a stone. He has nothing on the books. You're not getting anything from him, especially now that he's in jail. I would do the same thing. However, let's not sit here and act like Portee is a victim. Do you have any idea how many people have spent the rest of their lives in prison because they didn't want to open their mouth? Portee very easily could have been one of those people. And if Portee had gone and gotten on the witness stand and confessed that he saw Don Taylor kill Joyner and whatever, if he had done all that and then just gone on to live a normal life, there'd be nothing wrong with that. I mean, I personally would never do it, but whatever, to each his own. But you don't get to start your criminal career out as a complete rat. And not only are you a rat, but you're a lying rat. And then for it to be framed as oh my god, Portee, this poor, innocent little victim that was coerced to lie. No, bro, you didn't need leniency on your robbery charges. You easily could have not lied. You easily could have shut your mouth and just done your 2 to 5. There was never gonna be a life sentence for these robbery charges that he had. So I just call bullshit, okay? I call bullshit. This guy ratted, period. According to Taylor's lawsuit, these officials weren't content with just nudging Portee in the right direction. They allegedly spoon-fed him details of the case and twisted his arm to say what they wanted to hear. They supposedly sweetened the deal with offers of a lighter sentence if Portee played ball and fingered Taylor as the culprit. Now, obviously, if you've ever been on my page before, you know that my content is heavily geared towards the mafia. Well, as somebody interested in that, let me just say, absolute bullshit. I fully believe that anybody that ever makes the decision to become a rat should just fade away into obscurity until they die off alone. And that doesn't mean in life, that means in criminal matters. If you're gonna be a rat, you can't be a criminal, period. And if you're a criminal, be damn sure that you're ready to do the time for your crime and not just turn around and rat somebody else out and put them in jail because you don't feel like doing the time for the crime that you committed. And this man not only ratted, not only implicated an innocent man as per his own admissions, but then went on to build an entire criminal empire doing the same shit that he had somebody put in jail for over 22 years. He got a 22 years to life sentence. And okay, I'm about to say something that's very, very controversial, but I truly don't believe that people should go to jail for admitting that they lied in court. You know those piece of shit women that lie and say that somebody raped them and then it comes out 10 years later that they just had a crush on that dude and the dude didn't like them back, so they sent the dude to prison for 10 years for absolutely nothing, and people are lining up with pitchforks and signs and screaming that these women should go to prison. I personally don't think that they should. I know that's a super shitty thing to say, and let me explain myself, because if you just hear that out of context, you might hate me. I'm not sticking up for liars. That's not what I'm doing. Let me tell you why. I truly believe that if you hand out prison sentences for telling the truth eventually about your lie, that will just encourage people to never tell the truth. Yeah, does that girl deserve to rot in goddamn hell for taking away 10 years of an innocent dude's life? Absolutely. I'm not on her side. She deserves to rot in hell. But if the outcome of coming forward and admitting that you lied is jail time, guess what happens? She takes that lie to the grave. That poor dude that's been sitting in jail for 10 years for a crime that he didn't commit, instead, he ends up spending 20 or 30 years doing a full sentence because she never came out and told the truth. And like, okay, let's be so real right now and admit that these kind of sentences are never actually handed down for grape. But you catch my drift. If there's a penalty for telling the truth about a prior lie, such as jail time, too many liars would be too scared to come forward and admit their lie, and the person that was hurt by their lie would sit in prison for even longer. So you can't hand out penalties for lying, because by doing that, you're going to make people too scared to come forward with the truth. So now, with that thought process, I can't say that I think that Portee deserves to get prison time for admitting that he lied. I don't. At least he came forward and admitted that it was a lie. Even though he took away 17 years of this poor man's life, he was doing 22 and a half to life. He could have sat in jail for 35 years. Portee could have never said anything. And honestly, if prison time was the penalty for coming forward and saying that you lied, he wouldn't have said anything. He would have kept his goddamn mouth shut. But holy shit, do I think that he deserves to rot in the depths of hell for this shit. And the fact that an entire coast followed him and banded together and formed an enterprise in his name, and were perfectly fine doing that, knowing that he was already a goddamn snitch, makes my blood boil. Like, if you're gonna follow a criminal, at least follow a criminal that criminals correctly. And the crazy part about all this is that I want to root for Portee. Like, obviously, I'm not about that gang life. Let's take one look at me and know that that's the goddamn truth. I'm not in a gang. I would never be accepted into a gang. I am a little bitch, okay? But for real, if it's a battle of East Coast versus West Coast, I'm repping for my home team every time, so I want to see the East Coast win. I want Portee to be the hero that this coast could band together behind. But if that means getting behind a rat, personally, I would rather stand alone any day of the week. I don't care what an asshole that makes me sound like. Omerta, baby. Shut your goddamn mouth. So anyways, I will go ahead and get off my high horse and get back to the issue at hand. Taylor's case. Now, if these allegations hold water, we're talking about serious breaches of trust here. Tampering with witnesses and cooking up false testimony, that's not just bending the rules. Like, you're shattering the whole system of justice by doing that shit. And it happens every day. So what does this all mean for Taylor? Well, it means that he's a free man. Although he did spend 17 years in prison, he's now a free man, and he could have done 35, 45 years, and now he's not. And Taylor's suit definitely has legitimacy. When the shooting first happened, there was a witness. Terrance Joyner was walking down the street with a friend, Evelyn Hall, and there was two men on the other side of the road that said that they had drugs. When Joyner and Evelyn Hall crossed the road to get these drugs, Joyner said that he didn't have enough money to get the drugs that the drug dealers had. A whole drama dispute happens, and Joyner ends up getting shot. Now, when Portee comes through, and obviously he didn't see this, he has no idea, but when he comes, he's trying to do whatever he can to get out of this sentence, because they're saying you can get up to 50 years. He's trying to lower his sentence. So they turn around and say, oh, well, maybe you were a witness to the Don Taylor shooting. But when he initially was questioned, he gave completely different information than the information that Evelyn Hall, who was with Joyner at the time, gave. There was two shooters, and Portee identified Taylor as the actual shooter. But he gave completely different information. He said that they walked from a different part of the road, like completely contradictory to everything that Evelyn Hall said. But by the end of that conversation, the police had him telling the right story. So when he took the stand, he told the right story. His story didn't differ from Evelyn Hall's account at all. Another huge perk for Portee to go ahead and lie about Don Taylor was that the prosecution allowed Portee to have a conjugal visit with his girlfriend. So getting a reduced sentence and getting a conjugal visit with your girlfriend is worth throwing an innocent man in jail for the rest of his life. No big deal. There's a lot more that Portee said that just didn't line up with anything about what actually happened. So when you're looking back on it, it's like, oh my God, how is this not completely obvious? And it was completely obvious. They just didn't care. I mean, at the very end of the day, Don Taylor did walk away with something. Not worth it. He spent 17 years of his life in prison, but he did sue New York twice and come to a settlement twice. On the first settlement, he was able to get $900,000, and then on the second settlement, he was able to get $1.4 million. Which, remember, this is in the 90s, worth a lot more than it is today, But still, this man sat in jail for 17 years. I think if you talk to him, he will tell you that he would give up all that money for the 17 years he lost. This man wasn't just like a loser when he was arrested. He was in school getting a business degree. He had a job. Like, the fact that this happened to him destroyed his life. And yeah, he got a little compensation, but at the end of the day, absolutely not worth it. And fuck you, Portee, for doing that to another human being. Okay, so now that we've rewound and gone over the fact that Portee was a rat, but he was a lying rat, let's go over the 2001 conviction that just took him out. Portee was arrested along with 15 other people on May 8th, 2001. Due to this arrest, he was hit with a whopping 50-year sentence, landing him in the Supermax ADX Florence prison in Colorado. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the big leagues. Interesting fact, this is actually where I discovered Portee. I was on this site that has a list of all the notorious gangsters that had done time or were currently at ADX because one of the 1,000 gangsters, I don't remember who it was, but one of them I was covering was currently at ADX. So I'm looking at him, and then it's like a list of the other gangsters that are listed at ADX. And I stumbled upon Portee, and I was intrigued, so thanks ADX for always providing me top-notch content. Some other people on that list that have been incarcerated at ADX Florence include Ted Kaczynski, aka the Unabomber, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, aka the Boston Bomber, Mamdouh Mamam Salim, the co-founder of Al-Qaeda, Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, El Chapo, no aka Needed, you catch my drift. The worst dregs of human society is in this prison. This jail is most well known for having prisons that have been deemed too dangerous, too high profile, or too great a security risk for even maximum security prisons. Prisoners here can expect to be kept in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. For 1 hour a day, they will be shackled, handcuffed, and allowed to exercise and make a phone call. Exercise takes place in a concrete pit resembling an empty swimming pool. And everything about their surroundings is designed to prevent these guys from knowing their location. The window in their cell is only facing up. It allows them to see the sky and the roof, but absolutely no distinguishing views at all. Same thing with the exercise area. There's no view out of those windows. You can just see the sky. And this is all done to prevent them from orchestrating an escape. If you can't tell people where you are in the prison, they can't come help get you out. These prisoners have a restricted diet so that they can't use any of the food that they eat to harm themselves or others. And most of the cells at ADX even have showers so that the prison guards don't have to bring them to the showers in order to just make sure that the prison guards have to spend as little time as possible with these prisoners. Even with these crazy ass precautions in place, there have been 3 murders at ADX. Can you imagine having all these precautions and still having a murder? Like, I'd be pissed. Like, I did all this, and you're telling me it wasn't enough? So, before we move forward, let's stop here and talk for a minute about the charges on Portee in 2001. Portee was officially charged on May 8, 2001, and he was charged with 83 counts. Let's take a trip through these 83 counts because I've compiled them all together, but I'm not going to read them all and bore the shit out of you, but I'll put up what I wrote down on the screen so you can pause and read if you're interested. And I'm just putting up the summary. I'm not putting up every single thing about his charge just because there's so much. And 99% of it you can't understand. There's so much. So below every charge, there's a summary, and I'm just going to read you the summary that's below every charge. The defendant is hereby committed to the custody of the U.S. Bureau of Prisons to be imprisoned for a total term of 600 months or 50 years as follows. 600 months on count 1, 2, 3, and 17. 240 months on count 10 to run concurrently with counts 1, 2, 3, and 17. 180 months on count 25 and 26 to run concurrently to counts 1, 2, 3, 10, 17, 19, and 20. 120 months on count 38 to run concurrently to counts 1, 2, 3, 10, 17, 19, 20, 25, and 26. Upon release from imprisonment, the defendant shall be on supervised release for a term of 5 years as follows. 5 years on each count 1 through 3, and 17, 3 years on counts 10, 19, 20, 25, 26, and 38, all terms to run concurrently. So let's go through what I just said in terms that can actually be understood. Now, what this is pretty much saying is that he got 50 years in jail. He has 83 counts. Not every single one of them went through. There's a lot of them that the prosecution withdrew before it even went to trial, but when he was arrested, he was charged with 83 charges. But from those 83 charges, or however many he was found guilty of, he got a blanket 50 years, and then he got a bunch of other sentences that are running concurrently with the 50-year sentence. And now that just means that at any given time, he's probably doing multiple sentences at a time. And because they all say that they're running concurrently with all the ones before it, it means that, okay, so the longest secondary sentence is 240 months. So for the first 240 months, he's doing 2 sentences. He's doing the 50 years that he got as a blanket term, and he's also doing the 240 months. Now, for the beginning of that, let's say, there's 60 months that he's doing other charges. So now he's doing the 50 years, he's doing the 60 months, and he's doing the 240 months. But honestly, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. All he's doing is serving the original 50 years. So to him, nothing changes. All in all, he's just sitting in jail for 50 years. What he's sitting in jail for, it doesn't really matter. Now, once again, I am no legal expert, and I don't know shit. But I feel like a lot of this is done purely for precedent. In other words, if he was found guilty of some of these crimes, but received very little or no time on them because he was already sentenced to the 50 years, those lesser charges would be brought up in other people's trials later on. And the fact that he was serving that 50-year sentence, that would be ignored because they would only address the one charge that he was found guilty of. But the fact that he got a low sentence for that specific crime would be used to justify somebody else getting a lesser sentence because he got a lesser sentence. So since they're already throwing the book at him and he's already doing 50 years, he's given this extra 240 months and 60 months and all those other sentences so that in the future, when prosecutors are trying to get a longer sentence on other people for these lesser charges that he's charged with, they can use his sentence as an example. Pretty much, oh look, Omar Portee was given 240 months for this charge. I believe that this defendant should also get 240 months. And the fact that he was already doing 50 years, that's not even going to be mentioned. So let's walk through these charges. The first set of charges are centered around racketeering. We've got attempt to assault and murder, actual murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. The second set of charges are weapons offenses. These include violent crimes, drugs and machine guns, providing firearms to juveniles for violent crimes, unlawful transport, transfer, and sale of firearms, and transporting firearms interstate by a felon. Now, outside of the racketeering and weapons charges, we've got single charges as well. We've got identity theft, credit card and ATM fraud, and robbery. And under the robbery charge, it is interference with commerce by threat of violence. So the guilty verdict came down on August 27th, 2002, marking a huge win for law enforcement that has been cracking down on organized crime like the UBN. Then came the sentence. On April 14th, 2003, Portee was told that he would be spending the next 50 years behind bars. He would have been 34 years old when this sentence was handed down, guaranteeing that he won't see a free sky until he's 84 years old. And that was if he's able to survive this horrific place that is ADX Florence. So now, from all those charges, Omar Portee is officially confined to prison for the next 50 years. There's no 20 to 50 years. There's no up for parole no. His sentence is 600 months, period. That is how long he will serve. You know how you hear, like, your sentence is life without the possibility of parole? They didn't even throw that in there. No, they just said, you're serving 600 months, period. Now, Portee's imprisonment threw the UBN into chaos. As one of the bigwigs in the gang, his absence leaves a massive leadership hole. Without him calling the shots, the UBN, they kind of start to struggle. They start to splinter off and squabble amongst themselves. It's like a bunch of kids just like fighting over candy. And that's any criminal organization. You're going to have that. You're going to have infighting trying to get that top spot. And Portee, he was truly the glue that held the UBN together. Reports soon started flooding in about turf wars and clashes within the UBN. Now, that is not to say that the UBN was taken down by this. Despite the internal drama, the UBN soldiers they still exist right now. They may be fractured, and at this time they may be disorganized, but they're still very much in the game. So now let's take a minute to talk about Leonard O.G. Deadeyes McKenzie. McKenzie is one of the original founders of the United Blood Nations, and he was a big deal in the early days of the UBN. Alongside his partner in crime, Omar O.G. Mac Portee, McKenzie helped to build the UBN from the ground up. He was kind of the brains behind the operation, but McKenzie was handed a prison sentence even before Portee. Leonard McKenzie was handed a prison sentence of 25 years to life on March 27th, 2000, for shooting somebody in a bodega. In May of 1999, Terrance Powell, he missed his subway stop. He fell asleep on the subway, and instead of waiting for the next subway, he got out. He decided he's gonna walk home to his home in Crown Heights. While he's walking, he stops at a bodega. Apparently, while he's in this bodega, he looked at McKenzie the wrong way, and McKenzie would end up shooting Powell in each leg. So shot him twice, once in each leg. Powell spoke at McKenzie's hearing, saying that he still had pain and tingling in his right leg, and he didn't know if it would ever stop hurting. McKenzie's reputation on the streets, it was widespread, and Powell and all the witnesses that were there refused to testify. They wouldn't even pick out who it was. They knew who it was, but they were not saying a word. That pissed off Rafael Nunez, the owner of the bodega, who was the only person that was willing to go to court and identify McKenzie as the gunman. Now, normally, shooting somebody in the leg, especially when it's not even lethally, would not get you a sentence of 25 years to life. But when he went on trial, the judge looked at McKenzie's prior criminal history, and she also looked at his attitude and who he was as a person. And she decided that that was the right sentence. The DA said that in his 30 years as a prosecutor, McKenzie was one of the most purely evil human beings he had ever met. And that's saying a lot coming from a prosecutor of 30 years. I'm sure that man has come in contact with some nasty individuals, so I think McKenzie's pretty goddamn evil. As Powell left the courtroom, he was heckled by 3 of McKenzie's entourage, who slung slurs and threats at him as he was escorted out of the courtroom through the back for his own protection. McKenzie filed suit against the prison that he was locked up in 2007 because he was denied contact visits in New York City jails. He had filed suit about this complaint previously, he won that suit, and he was allowed visitors, but he still hadn't been allowed any contact. The prison tried to have this suit thrown out because he had engaged in subsequent misbehavior, namely when he had assaulted another prisoner and possession of a deadly weapon and attacking that prisoner with the deadly weapon. And all of this occurred less than a full month after he won his grievance in 1999. The grievance was approved in September of 1999, and then on September 20th of 99 is when he attacked another inmate. So couldn't have been more than a full month. He filed suit against Rikers Prison and the Rikers Island law librarian, his last name is Blunt, I don't know what his first name is, on January 29th, 2002, alleging violations to his constitutional rights. And he did this all while he was at Auburn Correctional Facility. He said that while he was at Rikers, they had denied him access to a mosque, a law library, and contact visits. And there's a whole lot that goes into this, but honestly, this just kind of stood out to me because it's proof that he's in jail. Now, I mentioned that there's proof that he was in jail because this whole thing is so weird. And I swear to God, I'm gaslighting myself because I can see records of him suing for civil rights violations, but in other places, it's reported that he just retired and walked off into the sunset. I have no idea what's going on because this one that I'm looking at was written in 2008, well after the time that he was locked up. Maybe McKenzie got out? I don't think so, though, because I see civil rights suits in 2007, And this report was written in 2008 that says that he retired and walked off into the sunset. Maybe it's a different person, but it can't be, because in the report of him suing for his civil rights violations, he's mentioned as the founder of the Bloods. I don't know what's going on. I hate to say this, but I really think it's possible that this is a case of life before the internet. This police report lists McKenzie as having retired from the gangster lifestyle, living a peaceful life. But meanwhile, he is sitting in Auburn Correctional Facility, which is the only reason that they're not seeing him wreak havoc upon the world, leading them to think that he's retired, and them having no way to see that federal charges were pressed and he's still sitting in prison right now. Thank God for living in the day and age of Google. 2008 was not a fun time, guys. It was not fun. I was there. It wasn't fun. Now, while the UBN is mostly made up of guys, there are female members too. They might not be as common, but they are definitely there. And there's a lot of females in high-ranking roles. Now, the roles of women, they can kind of vary from set to set and from person to person, obviously. Some women hold positions of authority and respect, while others just kind of play supporting roles. It just depends on the set and the traditions and the girls. So, you want to join the UBN? Well, first things first, you need to know somebody in the gang already. You need an existing member to vouch for you and introduce you to the gang. You can't just show up and be like, hey, I want to be in the UBN, please. No, it doesn't work like that. Once you got your foot in the door, it's time to show what you're made of. Some potential members may be asked to flex their muscles and prove that they've got what it takes to hang with the big dogs. That may take throwing down. That may take having to commit crimes. Now, here's where things get really intense. The infamous beat-in ritual. You're getting jumped by the gang for 31 seconds straight. 31 seconds may not sound like a very long time, but if you're someone that's ever been in a life or death situation, you know how long each second seems to take. Now put 20 to 30 dudes beating the crap out of you as hard as they can. Each one of those 31 seconds is gonna feel like a lifetime. The 31-second beatdown is considered tame when you look at other violent gangs that jump members in. They do it for a lot longer. But don't worry, the initiation ritual grew from there. Soon, potential members were given more hoops to jump through. One of these hoops was called the Buck 50, where the potential member had to go out and find someone that was non-affiliated, slash their face to the point that they would need 150 stitches to close it up. And this is somebody that has no part of any gang, just a complete civilian. That kind of makes the dude walking around New York City punching girls in the face seem tame, huh? This particular practice put a huge wedge in between the relationship with the UBN and their West Coast brothers, who they only went after people that were in rival gangs. They never went after innocent people. So that really pissed them off that there's some kind of connection between them and the UBN, and the UBN is out here attacking civilians. That is not what they stand for. So that pissed them off even more. So you survived the beatdown, you survived the Buck 50, whatever. You have made it to the next level. Now it's time to hit the books. You get schooled on UBN's history, rules, and oaths. Now, once you've passed all the tests and memorized all the rules, you are officially brought home, which is welcoming you to the UBN family. Honestly, I can't really put this in La Cosa Nostra terms. Maybe at this point you would be an associate, but there's no rituals to become that, because you're still brand new to this gang. It's not like you would be a made guy at this point if you're looking at La Cosa Nostra. You're just associated. You're in the gang, but the mafia, you have to be in the mafia for a really long time before you get made. Where with these guys, you get this whole ritual to get into the gang in the first place at the very beginning. You do have to be careful when you join these gangs though, because once you're in, you're in. They have a saying, blood in and blood out. You get beat in, and the only way you leave is supposed to be in a body bag, but people get jumped out, I think. I don't know. Either way, it's supposed to be a lifelong commitment, and definitely not a decision to be made lightly. Now, let's talk about some of the arrests that the UBN has seen in the days since Portee's arrest. In 2006, there was a large law enforcement operation called Operation 9 Connect. This operation went after the 9 Trey gangsters in New Jersey. On July 25th, 2006, over 60 gangsters that belonged to the 9 Trey gangsters were arrested. Another major law enforcement bust was in Charlotte, North Carolina, back in 2009. On February 25th of 2009, 15 individuals linked to the United Blood Nation were arrested. All of these arrests were centered around drugs. They were federal drug conspiracy offenses, and there's a whole bunch of related charges, but every single one of them is about drugs. Apparently, these guys were a part of a big drug distribution network dealing in cocaine, heroin, and marijuana. Now, let's go a little bit more into this one just because I kind of like this one, so I'm going to go over it more. There's a large law enforcement operation called Operation Heat. This operation, in particular, went after the 9 Trey gangsters and the infamous Lucchese family in New Jersey. The 9 Trey gangsters and the Lucchese family's Jersey crew teamed up to smuggle drugs and prepaid cell phones into East Jersey State Prison. And obviously, as I've said multiple times, most of the videos that I do on this channel are about the mafia, so I see the word Lucchese, I get interested. The Lucchese family, part of the Italian-American mafia, has a long history in organized crime, especially in the Northeast. If this is something that piques your interest, take a look at any of my other videos. Out of all my videos, I would say at least 90% of them are revolving around the mafia. I love the subject. So if this is the first video that you're seeing on my page and you're intrigued by this little fact, go check out any of my other videos. I'm sure there's something that you'll find that you like. By joining forces with the 9 Trey gangsters, the Lucchese's were looking to expand their operations into the prison market, a very lucrative business. When this whole conspiracy started, law enforcement started Operation Heat to monitor and then take everybody down. 34 members of the Lucchese family's Jersey crew were arrested in May of 2010. And I say members and associates because, I mean, technically the 9 Trey gangsters are associates. They're not soldiers, they're not in the mafia, but they're associated with the mafia because they're doing business with them. Among the people that were arrested in this thing was Dwayne Spears, a big shot within the 9 Trey gangsters. He was like, I think, a 5-star general. And his involvement in this and his arrest in this shows a deep collaboration between these two criminal organizations, because to have somebody so high up be arrested and like involved in this, it wasn't just a small little operation. They were doing some serious shit. There was another operation launched against the UBN that went down in North Carolina on May 18th, 2012. In this operation, they rounded up 28 UBN members in North Carolina, and there was a range of charges, but they were really serious ones. In May of 2017, law enforcement again went after the 9 Trey gangsters. In this bust, they took down 83 individuals on all sorts of charges, from racketeering, conspiracy, to murder, assault, drug dealing, and even financial crimes like bank and wire fraud. 82 out of 83 of those that were arrested ended up getting convicted. This operation was the one that Pedro Gutierrez was arrested in, and he was given a 22-year sentence as a result of this operation. One of the defendants, Bianca Kiyoshi Harrison, aka Lady Guns, admitted in court to holding the rank of high. That's a really high rank in the UBN set. She was also found guilty of drug trafficking. She got a sentence of 32 months in prison. If she was in the mafia, she easily would have been given life for that same crime. I'm not saying one is worse than the other, but you never see light sentences handed down to mafia leadership. Like, even these guys that got the higher sentences, they got 20 years, and 19 years. That is not what would happen in the mafia. Look at the commission trials. Almost every single defendant in that trial was given life, and most of them were given 100 years, the way that Portee was given 50. No parole date, no nothing. You are dying in prison. And the commission trial sentences, they were a regular rather than an anomaly in mafia sentencing. So to see somebody that admits in open court to having a leadership position in the gang in 2017, so way after RICO became a thing, getting 32 months in prison. It's a slap on the wrist. I mean, good for you, girl. You had an amazing lawyer. It's just wild for me to see. Operation Tin Panda was a major law enforcement operation that went down in the Washington metropolitan area. On December 6th, 2017, authorities busted over 40 people in coordinated raids. During these raids, they found a ton of illegal stuff. Heroin, cocaine, meth, guns. You name it, they seized it. After the dust settled, they managed to convict 39 people on federal charges related to firearms and drugs. One of the big fish that they caught in this bust was Tarvel Vandiver, supposedly the head honcho of the UBN subdivision called the Imperial Gangsta Bloods up in Northern Virginia. Vandiver was given a 20-year sentence in October of 2018. Alrighty, I think we have fully gone over Omar and the UBN. If you are still here, you are a real one because I know that this is going to be a very, very, very long episode. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys actually enjoyed this one because I was doing Angelo Leonardo for such a long time that it's really cool to go out and learn about a whole new gang and a whole new person and to get it done in one episode. Thanks so much for watching. Join me next week as I delve into the lives and legacies of some of the most fascinating and infamous gangsters in history. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow, comment, do all the things, and I'll see you next week. Bye!